Remember Star Wars Episode 1 Racer? The futuristic F-Zero X/Extreme G-esque racing game for the Nintendo 64? Well, we're not looking at that game. We're looking at the Game Boy Color port of Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. There's a particular genre of game that's always intrigued me, and I hope to cover more of these in the future. That is the downport, a conversion of a popular game for much less powerful hardware. I grew up more of a handheld player than a console gamer, so I always ended up with the Game Boy versions of games. And what always intrigued me was what compromises were made. How were the graphics simplified? What features were cut? How was the gameplay changed? And when games leapt to 3D, the difference between the consoles and the Game Boy became even more pronounced. Obviously, the 3D superfast Star Wars Episode 1 Racer wasn't going to translate over verbatim. The Game Boy had a few 3D games, but they were all super slow and choppy. So instead, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer for the Game Boy Color is a top-down racer. The Nintendo 64 game had the player race against 11 opponents. The Game Boy Color version? One opponent. And then most of the time, the opponent is either so far ahead or so far behind that you never see them. The levels do correspond to those found in the Nintendo 64 game. They have the same color schemes and, surprisingly, even some of the same landmarks. But the courses are all rather simplistic because the game has a bird's eye view and there can't really be any interesting gameplay besides left and right turns. The screen real estate is so cramped and the pod racers are so big that it's really hard to communicate upcoming turns. So the game presents arrows right before the turn saying turn right or turn left. The game ends up being a series of responding to arrow cues. And as you can probably see from the video, I'm not very good at this. I don't begrudge why this game was made the way it was. If you're going to make a pod racing game for the Game Boy Color, it's probably got to be top-down. And the system can't support too many racers on screen, so it's just the player and one computer opponent. I get why these decisions were made. What I don't get was why it was even greenlit to begin with, especially when it didn't come out until December 1999, 7 months after the movie and the console versions of the game. I'm not sure why they thought this game needed to be made. I mean, I know they were like, we're making this cool game for the Nintendo 64 based on the super popular scene from this new Star Wars movie. Like, that's cool, dude, but like, 100 million people own Game Boys. We should probably make them a game too. Never mind that it'll be horribly compromised compared to the flagship game. Oh, and how compromised it was. The Game Boy Color is sort of an equivalent to the original Nintendo, and that system was capable of some pretty rad graphics, but cheap cash grabs rarely take advantage of a system's hardware. Although, weirdly enough, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer has a rumble cart. Let's take a step back. The Nintendo 64's Rumble Pack introduced the console world to force feedback in controllers. The Rumble Pack was a little motor that would make a controller shake if a player was hit. A player fired a gun, the controller would kick like a real gun. But the Game Boy would not be sold short. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer is one of the select few Game Boy games whose cartridge has a tiny little motor in it that would shake when the engine rumbled or when the player hit a wall. Because what really sells the illusion of racing in this game is the total immersion of force feedback. I mean, I kind of still get this game, though. In 1999, I would play any game I could get my hands on. I played rudimentary games on my TI-82 graphing calculator till the cows came home, including a top-down race car game where my car was the letter V and I navigated a course avoiding obstacles and walls made out of brackets. So maybe I was the target audience. Maybe they thought, this kid is wasting hours on this lame game. We can do better than that. And that's how we got this game.